Well, Gary Lineker, if you're the BBC, would you right now be thinking, who would rid me of this troublesome priest, and why have they not done so?
Well, what leapt to my mind with this latest unnecessary step into the political furore was the name Carol Vorderman. Now, Carol has been very vociferous, very open about her political views, stating them wherever she can, just like Gary Lineker. As a result, she's been sacked from the BBC in Wales. They told her she could either be one thing or the other. She could be a radio commentator, a radio host, running her own arguably non-news program, or she could go elsewhere and be a political commentator. That, frankly, is what they ought to do with Gary Lineker, because Gary Lineker is, without question, using his public profile that he's got for being paid over £1 million a year at the BBC, one of their very biggest stars, to promulgate blatantly political views. He's not just putting his own views forward, he's attacking government figures, he's mocking elected MPs. I'm afraid he's just gone beyond the pale. I have no objection whatsoever to Gary Lineker having his views. I've no objection whatsoever the fact he's got 9 million followers. He can talk to them every minute of every day on Twitter. Fine. But not while he is one of the biggest, most public stars on the BBC. He's a former footballer. And, you know, I'm glad that he's got opinions about political affairs, but he can't use his position to attack constantly a rival political party.
Neil, I think he's suffering from a syndrome that both you and I know about. People who find themselves in the newspapers get addicted to being in the newspapers. He likes to be at the centre of a storm, I think. However, this time I think he's stepped over the line, because the last time he was in trouble over his social media posts, it was because he compared the Tory Rwanda plans, the Tory immigration plans, to the Nazis in 1930s Germany. That resulted in him being suspended, and the BBC then came up with these new set of social media rules. Now, when he signed this petition a couple of days ago, in a rather mealy-mouthed way, we all said, well, he's breaking your rules. The BBC said, no, because this was just social media. A petition is on paper. We didn't cover paper. That is a really mealy-mouthed excuse. Since then, he's got involved in this big squabble on social media, on X or Twitter or whatever we're calling it today, in which he's accused Jonathan Gullis of not being able to read and taunted the Defence Secretary Grant Shapps because of all the names he's used. So he has insulted them. The Tim Davie, the Director General, his statement says, while the guidance does allow people to talk about issues that matter to them, it is also clear that individuals should be civil and not call into question anyone's character. He has clearly broken those rules. That if Tim Davie does not act, he's got a serious authority problem, hasn't he?
Well, he already has, hasn't he, Kevin? Because the first time this hit the headlines, Gary Lineker was simply, if you like, putting forward yet another view on Twitter about his Rwanda views. That caused the storm that it did. And the difference this time is he knows how sensitive this subject is. He knows how close to the line he's walking. He knows that he is absolutely slapping a piece of cod around the face of the Director General of the BBC. He knows exactly what he's doing. And he has consciously stepped forward to provoke this row. He hasn't stumbled into it in a way like he did last time. This is quite deliberate. Yeah. He has deliberately caused this furore.
Good point.
Jake, I want to bring you in here because, I mean, you know, you like a good old investigation. If you were investigating this, what do you think you would find? Does Gary Lineker have some bodies buried anywhere? Is there some clause in his contract that it means that he'll get a massive payout if the BBC do get rid of him? Why are they hanging on to him? Or is it just that perhaps he says the sort of things that a lot of their execs agree with?
Well, I think those are good questions. I mean, look, I think the BBC, when it drew up these new guidelines, it tried to balance freedom of expression with responsibilities to BBC impartiality. And Gary Lineker is a star. He's a freelance member of staff, so he's not a member of staff. He's a freelancer, and the rules are slightly different for those individuals. I think the BBC would say he's entitled to his views, but the point is, as a major BBC star, he has to agree to abide by a set of social media rules. And Kevin, I mean, you set out some of those things. It's not actually the signing of this letter that is the issue. My understanding of the situation, and having spoken to a number of BBC insiders about this, the issue is the interactions he has had with Tory MPs, and that has raised questions about whether he has criticised the character of individual politicians and potentially broken guidance on civility in public discourse. I'm using the technical language in the BBC rules. I think this is probably the first serious test of the new guidelines, and it's clear as mud as to whether the BBC has found that Gary Lineker has broken them. And I think the BBC has a responsibility to be transparent about whether it thinks that Gary Lineker has gone too far. And if it does not do that, I do not think that is a good outcome for licence fee players.
Well, Jake,
it does feel to me...
civility in public discourse, accusing a Tory MP of not being able to read, not particularly civil, is it? I mean, he's broken these rules. The question is what is the Director General, Tim Davie, going to do about it?
Well, look, you're entitled to that view. I'm not the person in that chair making that decision. I'm not the individual who's enforcing these guidelines. I think this is really tricky for Tim Davie because he was significantly burnt last time this circus came to town. He suspended Gary Lineker. It spectacularly backfired on the BBC when all of Gary Lineker's colleagues walked out and an entire weekend sporting schedule on the BBC was disrupted. They will not want to repeat that. So they have to balance the sort of the responsibility that Gary Lineker has to the BBC's impartiality with making sure that audiences and his allies within the BBC are not feeling like he's being mistreated. And that's a tricky tightrope to walk for the BBC. But I think it needs to be much more transparent about its thinking on this issue. And there are clear questions here, I agree. There are clear questions here as to whether Gary has broken these guidelines.
Neil, Jake, thanks so much.